The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Adeline sat frozen at her desk. She was 34, exhausted, and she knew this moment was coming. Her boss of 8 years, Michael, walked toward her, expression tense, smile forced. A message blinked on her phone screen, meeting. My office. Now. Just 6 words. No greeting. No explanation. But she understood. She had sensed it for months, in the way he stopped making eye contact, the way her name vanished from project briefs. Still, knowing it was coming didn't dull the sting. As she stood, the screech of her chair against the floor made her flinch. Michael stood at his door, arm out, barely looking at her. Inside his office, the city skyline shimmered behind him. He didn't offer her a seat. Adeline, he said flatly, we've decided to let you go. No build-up. No apology. Just the blow. She clutched her bag tighter. Why? She asked, voice shaking. He smirked. You're too opinionated. Doesn't fit our culture anymore. The room swam. But something inside her refused to break. Not this time. Let me know where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been blindsided and chose to rise anyway. Life before that moment felt almost idyllic in its predictability. Every morning, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled Adeline's small, sunlit kitchen as she prepped her French press. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the gentle clink of ceramic as she poured her mug, those were the sounds of peace. She'd usually scroll through the news headlines on her tablet, sipping slowly, letting the caffeine gently coax her into alertness. Her apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, was her sanctuary. It wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, a testament to years of hard work and careful budgeting. The muted tones of her living room, the overflowing bookshelf, the soft throws draped over the sofa, each detail was a conscious choice, reflecting a desire for calm amidst the daily grind. Her commute to the downtown office, a 20-minute subway ride, was a familiar rhythm. She'd listen to podcasts, often business-related, sometimes true crime, anything to distract her from the sardine-can reality of rush hour. The world outside the subway windows, a blur of concrete and glass, was her battlefield. And she was a warrior, armed with ideas and an unwavering commitment to her work. At the office, Adeline was a force. As a senior marketing manager at Innovate Tech, a company she had poured her heart and soul into for nearly a decade, she was known for her innovative campaigns, her sharp insights, and her uncanny ability to anticipate market shifts. She'd arrived at the company as a fresh-faced junior, eager to learn, and had quickly climbed the ranks, proving her worth time and again. She'd often be the first one in, the last one to leave, fueled by a genuine passion for what she did. The office banter, the inside jokes shared over lukewarm coffee in the break room, the collective sigh of relief when a big project launched successfully, these were the small joys that made the long hours bearable. She'd sacrificed weekends, foregone vacations, even postponed personal milestones, all for the betterment of the company, for the collective success she believed they were all striving for. Her relationship with Michael, her boss, had once been a mentorship, a partnership. He had seemed to value her opinion, sought her out for her perspective, even celebrated her successes. There were late-night brainstorming sessions, animated discussions about market trends, and the shared thrill of closing a major deal. She'd seen him not just as a superior, but as someone who genuinely respected her intellect and drive. She trusted him, perhaps too much. She'd revealed her aspirations, her anxieties, even her family's struggles, believing in a professional bond that transcended mere hierarchy. She recalled one particularly tough quarter, when her mother had been ill, and Michael had, seemingly, been understanding, offering flexible hours, telling her to prioritize family. It had touched her, made her believe in the company's stated values of care and support. She had thrown herself back into her work with renewed vigor, convinced that her dedication was truly appreciated. Every morning, she'd wake up with a sense of purpose, ready to tackle the challenges of the day, ready to innovate, ready to contribute. She envisioned a future where she was at the helm, leading a team, shaping the narrative of Innovate Tech. The thought filled her with a quiet satisfaction, a sense of belonging to something larger than herself. This was her career, her trajectory, her carefully constructed world. The cracks, when they began to appear, were subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A cold draft seeping through a seemingly solid wall. It started with minor things. Michael would occasionally dismiss her suggestions in meetings with a wave of his hand, a casual "we'll circle back on that," which never materialized. Then came the selective memory. Ideas she had proposed, meticulously researched and presented, would resurface weeks later, attributed to a male colleague, often a newer, less experienced one. Adeline would feel a prickle of unease, a fleeting sense of disbelief, but she'd push it down, telling herself it was an oversight, a busy schedule, a simple mistake. One afternoon, she overheard Michael on a phone call, his voice hushed, almost conspiratorial. He mentioned a restructuring, a new direction for the marketing department. When she later asked him about it, he feigned ignorance, brushing it off as just preliminary discussions, nothing concrete. But the seed of doubt had been planted. She started noticing how he'd increasingly schedule meetings without her, especially those involving new clients or major strategic decisions. Emails she should have been CC'd on would go directly to others. It was a gradual exclusion, a slow fade from the inner circle. She found herself checking her inbox more frequently, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach each time she saw an email chain she wasn't a part of. The hum of the corporate office, once a comforting symphony of productivity, now sounded like a buzzing hive of secrets she was no longer privy to. Then came the bigger signs. A few months prior, Adeline had been working tirelessly on a presentation for a major potential client, Quantum Solutions. She had spent weeks researching, analyzing, and crafting a proposal she was truly proud of. The day before the big pitch, Michael had pulled her aside, his expression unreadable. "Adeline, I need you to hand over the Quantum Solutions presentation to Mark. He'll be leading the pitch." Adeline had been stunned. "But I've been working on this for weeks. I know this account inside and out." Michael had offered a bland smile. "Mark needs the experience. It's a developmental opportunity for him." It was a lie. Mark was perfectly competent, but he lacked Adeline's deep understanding of Quantum's unique needs. It was a blatant snub, a clear signal that her contributions were no longer valued. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She handed over her meticulously prepared slides, her notes, her research, feeling a part of herself being ripped away. Mark, looking uncomfortable, had offered a mumbled apology, avoiding her gaze. Later that week, Michael had announced that Innovate Tech had secured the Quantum Solutions deal. He had publicly congratulated Mark, making no mention of Adeline's foundational work. The injustice burned. The biggest red flag, however, came in the form of a cryptic text message from an old colleague, Sarah, who had left Innovate Tech months ago. "Be careful, Adeline. Michael's been talking. He's looking for a reason." Adeline reread the message, her heart hammering against her ribs. A reason for what? For her dismissal? The thought was terrifying, but it explained so much. The subtle undermining, the whispered conversations, the sudden shift in atmosphere. She tried to call Sarah, but her calls went straight to voicemail. The next day, Adeline arrived at the office early, a sense of unease gnawing at her. She walked past Michael's office, and through the slightly ajar door, she saw him at his computer, but his screen was facing away from her. As she passed, she noticed something glinting on his desk, a USB drive. It wasn't one of the standard Innovate Tech drives. Curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of foreboding, compelled her to act. When the office was empty for a brief moment, as Michael stepped out for coffee, she slipped into his office. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against her fear. She quickly grabbed the USB drive, plugged it into her laptop, and a quick scan revealed a folder titled Project Athena. Inside, nestled amongst what looked like legitimate company files, was a document titled Restructuring Proposal, Marketing Department. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The document outlined a plan to significantly downsize her department, merge some roles, and, most damningly, eliminate redundant senior positions, with her name explicitly listed as one of the redundant positions. The date on the document was 3 months prior. He had been planning this for months, meticulously, behind her back, while she continued to pour her energy into the company, oblivious. The hum of the office had never felt so deafening, so full of betrayal. The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave. She wasn't just being sidelined, she was being systematically pushed out. The shock, initially, was paralyzing. Adeline sat at her desk, the restructuring proposal document minimized on her screen, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on her. A wave of nausea washed over her, followed by a searing pain in her chest. It wasn't just the prospect of losing her job, it was the profound sense of being utterly discarded, of years of loyalty and hard work being rendered meaningless. The office, once a place of ambition and camaraderie, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in. She fought back tears, refusing to give Michael the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, a storm raged. Doubt gnawed at her. Had she been too trusting? Too naive? Had her opinions, her willingness to challenge the status quo, truly been her downfall? A flicker of self-blame, insidious and unwelcome, tried to take root. Maybe she should have just kept her head down, just done what she was told. But that wasn't her. She believed in speaking up, in advocating for what was right, for what was innovative. Her mind raced, a chaotic jumble of anger, hurt, and a desperate need for answers. She thought about her rent, her bills, the carefully constructed financial stability she had worked so hard to build. The fear was a cold, creeping tendril, threatening to suffocate her. But beneath the fear, a different emotion began to stir, a quiet, simmering anger. It wasn't the explosive kind, but a cold, steady flame. It was the anger of injustice, of a promise broken, of trust shattered. She looked at her reflection in the darkened screen of her monitor, her eyes a little too bright, a little too strained. No, she whispered to herself, the word a defiance against the rising tide of despair. No. I won't let him do this. The vulnerability, the initial shock, began to recede, replaced by a steely resolve. She wasn't a victim, she was a survivor. And survivors fought back. The decision didn't come as a sudden epiphany, but rather a slow, deliberate hardening. It was the quiet, determined turning of a key in a lock. She thought about all the times Michael had taken credit for her ideas, all the projects she had poured her energy into, only for him to swoop in at the last minute and claim victory. She remembered the countless late nights, the missed family gatherings, the sacrifices she had made for Innovate Tech, only to be deemed redundant. The injustice fueled her. She wasn't going to roll over and accept this. She wasn't going to let Michael win. This wasn't just about her job, it was about her dignity, her self-worth. She began to strategize, her mind shifting from emotional turmoil to a cold, calculating analysis. She started with the document she had found. It was damning evidence of premeditation, of a deliberate plan to oust her. But was it enough? She needed more. She started keeping a meticulous log of every interaction, every email, every meeting, noting down dates, times, and specific details. She began to copy all relevant work files, not just for her own records, but for potential leverage. It was a slow, methodical process, carried out under the veil of ordinary office work. She was still performing her duties, still contributing, still appearing outwardly unperturbed, even as she was meticulously building a case against the man who sought to destroy her career. Each saved document, each quiet screenshot, felt like a small act of rebellion, a silent assertion of her agency. The shift was profound. She was no longer just an employee, a potential casualty, she was an architect of her own defense, a quiet warrior preparing for battle. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful, unwavering determination. She wasn't just acting purposefully, she was acting strategically, with a clarity that surprised even herself. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And she was going to ensure she got it. The pivotal turning point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet click of a mouse. Adeline, having meticulously gathered her evidence, felt a calm resolve settle over her. The fear that had once been a constant companion had transmuted into a focused energy. She wasn't just going to sit back and wait for Michael to deliver the final blow. She was going to strike first, and she was going to strike hard. Her first move was to consult with a labor lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one recommended by Sarah, the former colleague who had warned her. Elena Rodriguez, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on difficult workplace discrimination cases, met Adeline in a discreet coffee shop a few blocks from the Innovate Tech office. Adeline laid out her meticulously compiled evidence, the restructuring proposal document, the email exchanges where her ideas were dismissed then repurposed, the log of her exclusion from key meetings, even the cryptic text from Sarah. Elena listened intently, her expression unwavering, only occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. "This is strong, Adeline," Elena finally said, pushing her glasses up her nose. The too opinionated reason, coupled with the documented plan to eliminate your position, reeks of pretext. We have a solid case for wrongful termination and potentially even retaliation. A surge of relief, hot and exhilarating, washed over Adeline. It wasn't just her imagination. She wasn't crazy. "What's our next step?" Adeline asked, her voice firm. Elena outlined a strategy. They would send a strongly worded letter to Innovate Tech's HR department, outlining the evidence and demanding a severance package that reflected not just her years of service, but the clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. They would threaten legal action if their demands were not met. "We leverage their desire to avoid a public scandal," Elena explained. "Companies like Innovate Tech value their reputation above all else." But Adeline had a different plan brewing, one that went beyond just a severance package. The betrayal had cut deep, and while financial compensation was important, she craved something more. She wanted to prove to Michael, and to herself, that her opinions were not a weakness, but her greatest strength. She had been secretly nurturing an idea for months, an innovative marketing platform that leveraged AI to predict consumer trends with unprecedented accuracy. She had pitched it to Michael months ago, only for him to dismiss it as too ambitious and not aligned with current market needs. Now, she saw its true potential. The pivotal plot twist came a week after Elena sent the letter. Michael, rattled by the legal threat and the detailed evidence, agreed to a meeting, not just with Adeline and Elena, but with the head of HR and a senior corporate counsel. Adeline sat across from Michael, her gaze steady, unblinking. He looked uncomfortable, his usual arrogance replaced by a strained politeness. He offered a generous severance package, contingent on her signing a non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete clause that would effectively bar her from working in marketing for a year. It was a clear attempt to silence her, to neutralize her. "I have a counter-proposal," Adeline said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the tense silence. Everyone in the room looked at her, surprised. Elena gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "I will sign the NDA regarding the terms of my departure and the non-compete, if Innovate Tech agrees to fund my new venture. A startup capital investment, in exchange for a minority stake in my new company and a first right of refusal on future collaborations." Michael scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. Fund your rival company? You're delusional, Adeline. Am I? Adeline countered, a faint smile playing on her lips. She pulled out a sleek tablet and, with a confident swipe, projected a detailed business plan onto the large screen in the conference room. It wasn't just an idea, it was a fully fleshed-out proposal, complete with market analysis, financial projections, and a detailed roadmap for development. The platform she had envisioned, the AI-driven marketing insights tool, was laid out in impressive detail. The corporate counsel, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Davies, leaned forward, her expression shifting from skepticism to genuine interest. Adeline had already done her homework, securing provisional patents and drafting preliminary agreements with potential tech partners. She explained the proprietary algorithms, the projected market share, the potential for massive ROI. It was a masterful performance, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth. Michael, his face paling, looked increasingly agitated. He tried to interrupt, but Ms. Davies held up a hand, silently urging him to listen. Adeline continued, her voice unwavering, painting a compelling vision of the future of marketing, a future Michael had been too short-sighted to see. She concluded with a flourish, emphasizing that Innovate Tech, by investing, could turn a potential liability into a profitable partnership, while avoiding a costly and public lawsuit that would inevitably damage their reputation. The power had shifted. It was no longer about her begging for a severance package, it was about her offering them an opportunity, on her terms. The revelation of Adeline's secret plans hung in the air, a palpable tension in the corporate conference room. Michael, usually so composed, looked visibly shaken. His jaw was clenched, his eyes darting between Adeline's confident posture and the detailed business plan glowing on the screen. The head of HR looked bewildered, while Ms. Davies, the corporate counsel, had a look of calculated consideration. Adeline had not just prepared for a battle, she had orchestrated a strategic coup. Ms. Davies, Adeline began, her voice calm, Innovate Tech has a choice. We can proceed with a lengthy, public, and potentially damaging lawsuit, where the details of this restructuring proposal and the manner of my dismissal will become public record. Or, you can invest in a proven innovator, someone who has consistently delivered results for this company for years, and gain a foothold in a rapidly evolving market with minimal risk. She paused, letting her words sink in. My non-compete would still apply to direct competitors, but my new venture, while in the marketing space, offers a unique, cutting-edge solution that complements, rather than directly competes with, Innovate Tech's current offerings. Think of it as an innovation arm, a strategic partnership rather than a rival. Ms. Davies, a seasoned negotiator, leaned back, her gaze unwavering as she studied Adeline. A minority stake and first right of refusal on future collaborations, that's a substantial ask, especially given the circumstances. Adeline met her gaze. My value to Innovate Tech has always been substantial, Ms. Davies. My track record speaks for itself. This isn't charity, it's an investment. An investment in a technology that Michael here dismissed as too ambitious. She let that last jab hang in the air, a subtle sting aimed directly at her former boss. Michael's face flushed. The discussion that followed was intense, lasting for hours. Elena, Adeline's lawyer, skillfully navigated the legal jargon, ensuring Adeline's interests were protected. Michael, despite his initial protests, was increasingly sidelined by Ms. Davies, who clearly recognized the strategic advantage Adeline was presenting. She understood that Adeline wasn't just a disgruntled employee, she was a valuable asset who had been mishandled. The optics of a lawsuit, especially one involving a female executive citing wrongful termination for being too opinionated, would be a public relations nightmare for Innovate Tech. The alternative, a strategic investment in a promising new technology, was a far more palatable option. Finally, After much deliberation and several private consultations between Ms. Davies and Michael, a compromise was reached. Innovate Tech would provide a significant seed investment for Adeline's new company, Ascendant Analytics, in exchange for a smaller minority stake than Adeline had initially proposed, and a non-exclusive first right of refusal on future collaborations, subject to mutual agreement on terms. The non-compete clause would be modified to be less restrictive, allowing Adeline to operate in the broader marketing technology space, but still preventing direct competition with Innovate Tech's core business for a defined period. It wasn't everything Adeline had asked for, but it was a resounding victory. She had walked in facing dismissal and walked out with a substantial investment for her dream company, effectively turning her betrayal into her launch pad. Michael, looking defeated, could barely meet her eyes when the final terms were agreed upon. As they shook hands, his grip was weak, his smile forced. Adeline, however, felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. She had turned the tables on him, using his own company's resources to fund her rise. The poetic justice of it was almost too sweet. She walked out of the Innovate Tech building, the hum of the office now sounding like a distant echo, replaced by the exhilarating buzz of possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena, "You handled that beautifully, Adeline." "Congratulations." Adeline smiled. This wasn't just a win, it was a liberation. Michael had sought to silence her, to diminish her, but he had only ignited a fire. And now, she was free to burn brighter than ever before. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind. The news of Adeline's departure from Innovate Tech, framed as a strategic partnership to launch Ascendant Analytics, spread through the industry like wildfire. There were whispers, of course, the kind that always accompany an unexpected career pivot. But Adeline, with Elena's guidance, had crafted a narrative of amicable separation and mutual benefit, effectively controlling the public perception. Michael, forced to toe the company line, had to publicly endorse the partnership, a bitter pill she knew he had to swallow. The irony wasn't lost on her. He had intended to bury her career, and instead, he had unwittingly funded its resurrection. The initial months of Ascendant Analytics were a mix of exhilarating progress and daunting challenges. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, transformed into a makeshift war room. The kitchen table became her conference room, her living room her brainstorming hub. The scent of coffee was now intermingled with the faint, metallic tang of new electronics and the faint scent of takeout. Long days bled into longer nights. She poured every ounce of her energy into building Ascendant Analytics, working with a small, dedicated team of developers she had painstakingly recruited, most of whom were disillusioned ex-employees from larger tech companies, drawn to her vision and her story. She learned to navigate the labyrinthine world of venture capital, intellectual property, and startup scaling. There were setbacks, of course. A crucial server crashed, a key hire didn't work out, a competitor launched a similar, albeit less sophisticated, product. Each obstacle felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder of the immense pressure on her shoulders. But with each challenge, Adeline found a deeper well of resilience. She remembered Michael's dismissive words, "too opinionated," and they became her fuel. She leaned into her opinions, trusting her instincts, making bold decisions that often defied conventional wisdom but consistently yielded results. She worked closely with her developers, iterating, refining, pushing the boundaries of AI-driven analytics. The late nights, fueled by cold coffee and sheer determination, began to pay off. The beta version of Ascendant Analytics platform, a sophisticated AI that could predict consumer behavior and market trends with uncanny accuracy, garnered rave reviews from early testers. Meanwhile, news from Innovate Tech filtered back to her through former colleagues who, despite the non-disclosure agreements, subtly hinted at the turmoil within. Michael's leadership, once seen as decisive, was now viewed as increasingly erratic. Without Adeline's strategic foresight and her ability to anticipate market shifts, Innovate Tech's marketing campaigns became stale, their market share began to stagnate. Projects she had spearheaded were failing, while his pet projects, lacking her critical input, fizzled out. He had surrounded himself with yes men, people who would simply affirm his increasingly questionable decisions, afraid to be labeled too opinionated. The very culture he had fostered, one of conformity and subservience, was now slowly strangling the company. Adeline heard whispers of plummeting stock prices, of key talent leaving, of a general malaise settling over a company that had once prided itself on innovation. Michael, ironically, found himself facing increasing scrutiny from the very board members who had once supported him. The consequences of his short-sightedness and his petty act of betrayal were slowly, but surely, catching up to him. He had sought to isolate Adeline, but in doing so, he had isolated himself from the very talent and ideas that kept Innovate Tech relevant. One particularly satisfying moment came when a major news outlet published an article detailing Innovate Tech's recent struggles, specifically highlighting a failed marketing campaign that Adeline had warned Michael about months prior. The article subtly praised Ascendant Analytics as a rising star in the marketing tech landscape, attributing its early success to its visionary leadership and cutting-edge AI. It was a public acknowledgement of her worth, a quiet vindication. Adeline didn't gloat. She simply focused on her work, letting her success be her loudest response. She had built something tangible, something that was thriving, not out of revenge, but out of a deep belief in her own abilities. The journey was far from over, but the path ahead, though still challenging, was now one she had forged for herself. She was no longer defined by someone else's dismissal, she was defined by her own defiant creation. The transformation was profound. Adeline, once merely a cog in a corporate machine, was now the driving force behind Ascendant Analytics. The early struggles, the endless nights, the moments of doubt, had forged her into a leader of unwavering conviction. Her office, a sleek, modern space with glass walls and minimalist design, was a stark contrast to the sterile cubicle farm she had left behind. The hum that filled this space was no longer oppressive, it was the vibrant buzz of innovation, of a team working collaboratively, respectfully, and passionately. The scent of artisan coffee now mingled with the fresh aroma of new ideas. Ascendant Analytics launched its full platform to widespread acclaim. The market was hungry for genuine innovation, and Adeline's AI-driven insights delivered. Clients, initially drawn by the novelty, stayed because of the undeniable results. The platform's ability to predict shifts in consumer sentiment and target marketing campaigns with unparalleled precision led to dramatic increases in ROI for their clients. The industry took notice. Awards started rolling in. Investor interest soared. The whispers of Michael's demise at Innovate Tech grew louder, more concrete. He was eventually forced to resign, his career in shambles, his reputation tarnished by a series of strategic blunders that were, in essence, the direct consequence of his inability to value diverse perspectives and embrace true innovation. Adeline didn't dwell on his downfall, her focus was entirely on Ascendant Analytics and its meteoric rise. She built a company culture antithetical to everything she had experienced at Innovate Tech. At Ascendant Analytics, opinions were not just tolerated, they were celebrated. Debate was encouraged, innovation was paramount, and every voice was heard. She mentored her team, empowering them to take risks, to challenge assumptions, to be too opinionated in the best possible way. The satisfaction she felt wasn't merely from her financial success, though that was certainly gratifying. It was the deep, abiding sense of affirmation, of having built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. She had proven, not just to Michael, but to herself, that her unique perspective, her drive, and her unwavering belief in her own vision were not liabilities but superpowers. One afternoon, a year after Ascendant Analytics had become a household name in the marketing tech industry, Adeline found herself standing on the balcony of her new office, overlooking the very same city skyline she used to see from Michael's old office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Her phone chimed, not with a demanding text from a former boss, but with a message from her head of product, celebrating a new client acquisition. She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. She thought back to that day, to Michael's cold, dismissive words, "You're too opinionated." It felt like a lifetime ago. She had taken that perceived weakness and transformed it into her greatest strength. She had been betrayed, but she had refused to be broken. She had been cast out, but she had built her own empire. Her journey was a testament to the power of resilience, the quiet strength of conviction, and the poetic justice of turning adversity into unparalleled triumph. What would you do in her shoes? If this journey from betrayal to empowerment moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of unbreakable spirits. Share in the comments, have you ever had to rise above someone's cruelty? Your story could inspire others.